Some fights are just fights, punches, kicks, submissions. But a few are legendary wars that define eras, careers, and the very soul of the UFC. These are the battles that made fans scream, fighters cry, and commentators lose their voices. Today, we're reliving the greatest UFC fights of all time, the ones that turned blood, grit, and heart into history. 1. Griffin vs. Bonnar. The fight that saved the UFC back in 2005, the UFC wasn't the billion-dollar machine it is today. It was barely surviving. Then came the Ultimate Fighter finale. Forrest Griffin vs. Stefan Bonnar. Two men who weren't fighting for belts. They were fighting for the sport's future. From the opening bell, it was chaos. Wild punches, zero defense, all heart. Neither man backed down, even when exhaustion set in. The crowd went berserk. Dana White later said it was the fight that made people care about the UFC. Griffin won the decision, but both fighters got UFC contracts and the UFC got reborn overnight. No flashy knockouts. No hype. Just warriors giving everything. That's how legends are made. 2. Lawler vs. MacDonald. 2. The bloodbath of a lifetime. If heart had a face, it would be Robbie Lawler and Rory MacDonald at UFC 189. From round 1, this was less a fight and more a war. Lawler's lip was split open, MacDonald's nose shattered, and neither man cared. The image of them staring at each other, covered in blood between rounds 4 and 5, that's MMA's Mona Lisa. Every punch looked like it could end the fight. Every second felt historic. Finally, in the 5th, Lawler landed a clean left hand that broke MacDonald's spirit and his nose for good. Fans still call it the greatest fight in UFC history. And honestly, they might be right. 3. Jones vs. Gustafsson. The champion who finally bled in 2013. John Jones looked unbeatable. Then Alexander Gustafsson showed up at UFC 165 and gave him hell. Gustafsson took Jones down, the first man ever to do it, and outboxed him for most of the fight. But Jones, being Jones, refused to lose. Round 4 was iconic, spinning elbows, wild exchanges, pure survival. By the end, both men looked like they'd been in a car crash. Jones barely held on to his title, and Gustafsson earned something even rarer: respect. It was a war that reminded everyone that even gods can bleed. 4. Henderson vs. Ruiz. The battle of the decade, Don Henderson vs. Shogun Ruiz. UFC 139. A 5-round epic where physics stopped mattering. Both men dropped each other multiple times. Both looked finished at different moments, and somehow both kept coming back. Henderson landed his trademark H-bomb again and again, and Shogun just refused to die. By the 5th round, the crowd was standing. Joe Rogan was losing his mind, and the octagon looked like a battlefield. It was declared one of the greatest fights of all time, and both fighters needed IVs afterward. There were no losers here, only survivors. 5. Silva versus Ansonen, the miracle comeback. Anderson Silva was the king, untouchable, unstoppable, untouchably smooth. Then came Chael Sonnen, who talked trash like it was his full-time job. But when the cage door closed at UFC 1, Sonnen backed it all up. He dominated Silva for 4.5 rounds, taking him down, pounding him out, and humiliating the champion. Then, with less than 2 minutes left, Silva did the impossible, locked in a triangle choke from his back, and made Sonnen tap. The entire arena exploded. One of the greatest comebacks ever, and proof that legends are made in seconds, not rounds. 6. Diaz vs. McGregor. To the war of egos. Some fights are about belts. Others are about pride. Conor McGregor vs. Nate Diaz at UFC 202 was the latter, a pure ego war between two fan favorites who refused to quit. After losing to Diaz the first time, McGregor came back with a vengeance. He dropped Nate multiple times, but Diaz, being Diaz, just smiled, bled, and walked him down. Round 5, both were exhausted and barely standing. When the bell rang, McGregor won by decision, but the fight itself was legendary. Both men left the octagon as heroes, and fans got a war for the ages. 7. Edgar vs. Maynard 2. The definition of heart Frankie. Edgar might be the toughest man to ever fight under 170 pounds. At UFC 125, he faced Gray Maynard and got absolutely wrecked in round 1. He was dropped multiple times, barely knew where he was, but somehow he survived. Then, unbelievably, he came back. Edgar rallied, used footwork, combinations, and outworked Maynard for 4 more rounds. The fight ended in a draw, but it became an instant classic, a symbol of resilience that defined Edgar's career. You can't teach heart. And Frankie Edgar proved that. 8. Whittaker vs. Romero 2. Technical violence, Robert Whittaker vs. Yoel Romero 2. At UFC 2, wasn't just a fight. It was a chess match with explosions. Every strike mattered. Every counter was dangerous. Romero landed bombs that would have killed most fighters, but Whittaker just kept moving, calculating, surviving. It was 5 rounds of elite violence strategy mixed with savagery. The fight was so close that fans still argue who won. What no one argues that it was one of the most skilled, brutal, and beautiful wars in modern MMA 9. Gaethje vs. Chandler. Gladiators. When Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler walked into UFC 268, everyone knew what was coming. Chaos. And chaos they delivered. 3 rounds of pure violence, 0 defense, and mutual insanity. Both men got dropped, both smiled in each other's faces, and both refused to quit. The crowd at Madison Square Garden roared like it was ancient Rome. By the end, everyone was exhausted. Fighters, fans, and commentators. Gaethje won, but the real winner was everyone who watched that masterpiece of madness. Theus Nunes vs. Cyborg. The Queen takes the throne to close it out. Let's talk about Amanda Nunes versus Cris Cyborg, the biggest women's fight in UFC history. Cyborg hadn't lost in over a decade. She was terrifying, but Nunes didn't care. She marched in, landed a bomb, and ended the fight in 51 seconds. It wasn't a long war. It was an explosion that changed the women's division forever. For once, the Queen got dethroned, and another took her place. That punch echoed through history. There you have it, 10 of the greatest UFC fights of all time. From bloody wars to shocking comebacks, these battles are why we love MMA, where legends are born, and history is written in sweat and blood. If you want more insane MMA stories, subscribe, because the next fight we break down might just become the next classic.